Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, as always, Jack Greenstock, joined by an amazing panel. With first, I'll pass it over to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram only. I know there's a fake pretender out there that apparently Facebook will do nothing about. So, but I'm on Instagram only, Spartan Grown, all one word, no space. And you can also shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com. But otherwise, I'm on no other platforms. So if there's scammers out there, I can't be responsible for them.
Don't give them your money or personal information. That's a good note, you know.
Exactly.
And I want to give a warm happy birthday shout out to Kyle of Pure Breeding. He won't be joining us tonight, but he just messaged us in the group chat a few minutes ago. So happy birthday to Kyle. But with that said, next we've got Dr. MJ. Welcome back.
Hey guys, yeah, Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. I am excited to be around for another show and curious what we'll get into today. It's always a fun new adventure. So grow with love, everyone.
All righty, we don't have a specific topic yet, so I definitely think we're going to hit some chat Q&A and maybe some topics from the panel will spring up as well. But next up, I'll pass it over to Noah the Grower.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower on Instagram with 2 E's. You can find me there. And been a panel member here for a couple of years, so happy to be here and get in with you guys.
We're officially coming on 3 years. I was just looking on Stitcher, and I think March 3rd or something was one of the first shows. Funny enough, the first one was like a problem I had in my garden, and then like the first episode that I could see labeled Growing with My Fellow Growers was like episode 3. So there's 2 episodes that aren't actually labeled Growing with My Fellow Growers, but then like the episode 3 I think is March 6th, I want to say, of 2019.
Were those first 2 shows like the full panel?
No, it was just myself, Skilbo, and I think the next one was you, Shane, and it might have just been you two. I was just reading through them like right before, but it was definitely a much smaller panel. Yeah, it was like something about autoflowers, and then the third one was labeled. It's like, listen to my show, Growing with My Fellow Growers, episode 3, and that's where I think more people started jumping in. But I don't want to forget to introduce the other 2 panelists we've got.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good. I'm just interested in that.
Yeah. Matthew Gates will be next.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I'm an integrated pest management specialist, and you can find me in many places. You can find me as a staff writer for Skunk Magazine. You can find me on YouTube, Zenthanol, and zenthanol.com for professional inquiries about pest management and information therein.
Happy to have you back as always. And last and absolutely not least, the American one.
Hello, Jack panel and everyone in chat. I am the American one. I'm the American one on the YouTube and the American one _with_18s, which is spelled ACHENES on the IG. And yeah, most of you know me. And then if you don't, go check me out and follow me. And yeah, glad to be here. I can't wait to see what comes up, like Dr. MJ was saying. And yeah, good, great.
The man with the amiaces that everybody loves, and many others, but that's the one I've seen the most people grow from the American one's stable there. I was just realizing that my cell phone was not muted, so I had to mute that. And I'll remind everybody to jump into the live chat if you are with us on YouTube right now, so you can see all the messages. And if you want to tag myself, you can tag at Cheap Home Grow or at Jack Greenstock. Both of them will make it pop up highlighted for me if you want to get your question noticed. Sorry, Tal, I cut you off there.
No, I was just gonna say it's really good seeing everybody run the amiaces, and you know, I learned a lot watching a lot of people starting, because a couple of them got all males, and it's prompting me to lean more and more to try and attempt a fem seed run at some point. But yeah, I have so many things I want to do. I don't have time or space. So I think I better study physics to overcome time and space, and I'll be able to get to everything I want to get done.
Relatable.
I think in terms of breeding, right? Tao?
Oops, sorry, yeah. In terms of breeding and yeah, just in general, everything.
Just the general
and just the seeds, the amount of seeds that I want to explore, it's like, it's endless. and
You
it
need-
just continues to grow. So just to like I put a timeout on starting new stuff. I'm going to go back to some of the stuff I already had and like tweak it a little and look for specific mother traits and father traits that I could get closer to a consistency that I want. But yeah, just trying this chocolate thing is like taking up everything. And I'm still going to save 2 males. And I was listening on some other podcast, a guy talking about breeding, and I had I like seeing this too. I had a mother and a sister where, you know, they were brother and sister. They looked exactly alike. And it was like, I want to use that male and cross that female and see if there would be consistency across the progeny. But sadly, that male didn't make it. And yeah, but that's like everything I run now. If I start new seeds, I want to keep the male to try it with all the girls that I got. You know what I'm saying?
Do you think you're legitimately going to go the feminized route with something like maybe Amiasis that you found has been pretty resistant to intersex traits?
Well, yeah, but my plan with that is I want to cross because and every male I get, I want to hit that proprietary plant with because I love that thing and it's solid too. So it's a big long story, but I had acquired some of the reversal spray a while back. I have in the refrigerator, and it's the kids. I told them like it might be a while before I get to it. It'd be like a good test to see if it lasts refrigerated. But in any case, I was going to use it on the chocolate that I got because they were feminized seeds. But then I ended up getting other chocolate flavored seeds that I kept, like that chocolate OG. I'm keeping 2 males of that, so I have a male of that I can make more seeds with and hit the chocolate with. So I'm really considering now hitting the proprietary with that spray, trying to get some pollen off of that and hitting everything with that pollen.
Have any of those chocolate OG females shown any promise as far as terps
One,
or aroma
yeah,
and chocolate department?
One has, but it's fainting and it's losing. Like, yeah, it was faint. And you know what? I think I unknowingly had COVID at one point because I was like, all these plants that I was harvesting, like, man, there's no smell. There's no smell. There's no smell. So I put them, you know, I jarred them up still and everything when they were great. And then I opened up one. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? And it just smelled so strong. It was that bubble tonic plant that I was telling you guys the kid sent me. And yeah, so at least at some point, I think I had a very low sense of smell at some point. But,
you can lose your smell from other, like even common colds.
Right.
My mother-in-law, whenever she would get the flu, she loses her sense of smell. So it's definitely something that can happen. The other thing somebody mentioned, I think it might have been Smart Poker or somebody else that used like one of the drying devices, but the herb was kept at about 60 degrees. And until it starts hitting like that room temperature, if it's like below 68, you're not getting a lot of those volatiles coming off of it. So
Right.
if it was like the winter time in New York and your house is like colder than 68, it was in jars and you just harvested it and it was kept below 68 the entire time, not a lot of volatiles are going to be coming off of that versus like if you left one of those jars in like a hot car and then you came back to it,
Right.
you
It comes
pop
back
it,
to
you're
the
like,
car.
holy fuck. It just like
Yeah.
smacks you in the nose.
That's
But
happened. You left it in the trunk and the whole car just reeked when you open up the door.
Anova says that Tao has Amiasis on Daga, but hasn't
Yes.
announced it. You
Daga
want to talk
love.
about that?
Oh, you know, well, yeah. So I just found it actually. So yeah, I Daga.garden has my Amiasis available, and I found the link. So I'll put the link in chat, and if you guys want to have at it, because it helps out Pete, helps out Future Cannabis Project, and it helps out me too. So it's a win-win-win, and you get some Amiasis.
It's a good way to go about doing it.
I'll go
There's
find the
a
link and
listing.
put it in there. Yeah.
Did they change it to Daga.garden? I remember it used to be Daga.love. It might be a different website though.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's where the seeds are anyway. I'll double check and I will post that link.
Anybody got anything new and exciting? I've seen Brandon's got some blueberry muffins that are starting to turn purple over there on his Instagram. Anybody got something new and early flower they're excited about?
Yeah,
Well, I
guys,
just
sorry.
flipped a flower, so I'm excited about that. But you know, they're still sort of transitioning.
What about you, Spartan?
That was me. I was like, I went through a cycle where I had everything out of so I had nothing in flower. And so now I'm just, instead of filling everything, I'm going to just not even light wise. I'm going to just section off 4 plants per light. But I'm going to just stagger them as they're ready, throw them in there. And so it's going to be a staggered harvest and be, a perpetual thing going. But right now I've got 2 plants in there. I've got a sour diesel and I don't remember what else I threw in there. But I got a banana daddy from Thunder Dan. I see him in chat. Shout out to him. The one he hunted. I got that going in next, which is going to be soon within the next probably week. And then behind that, I've got Cobra milk. I'm trying to get it to get big enough because it doesn't stretch much. And so that'll go in after behind that. But I don't know what's next. Probably Orange Dream Haze after that.
Do you know the lineage on the Cobra milk? I'm not familiar with that one. It's got an
That's
interesting name.
Tiki. That's Tiki Madman, and he crossed cereal milk with jealousy. And we pheno hunted a pack at work, and we narrowed it down to 3 phenos, the 1, 2, and 3. And the number 1 was really short. It didn't really stretch much. So they eliminated that, but I thought it had the best terp profile. So I kept it.
I'm with you on that. Cereal milk is one of my favorites. I'm not a huge jealousy fan, not like the emotion, but the actual strain or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cereal milk to me is some real special shit. That's like kind of new to me, but I guess it's been in Michigan since like 2015, 2016. And I guess it's made its way around, and I'm happy to hear you guys are growing some of it. Is the pheno that you picked the one with like the aroma and flavor that you're looking for? Is it kind of on that like more flavorful, milky, kind of sweet side?
Yeah, milky and like maybe berries of some sort, or I don't know. I'm not sure yet. I haven't grown it myself yet, other than we just grew it the one time at work. So I think once I get it going in organics, it's going to bring out more of the flavor profile I'm hoping, and I'll be able to narrow down some more.
It's reminiscent to me of a strain that I have not been able to find for a long time, and there's been a few people replicating it. So don't send me the people replicating it. I know who they are, but Fruity Pebbles, and since then Fruity Pebbles OG, FPOG as it's often referred to, have that actual true to like my childhood remembering of like Fruity Pebbles smell and flavor, and it also had a really solid high associated with it. And the bud was nice, dense, good structure, good bag appeal. So it's kind of all around a winner. And then cereal milk is like one of the closest in my memory to hitting that, but it's not quite as sweet as the Fruity Pebbles as I remember the phenos that I came across. But the cross of the cereal milk is interesting that I've come across from Cannabiotics is I think it's strawberry lemonade crossed to thick mint cookie, like number 13 or something, some pheno. But yeah, it was definitely not what I had thought it was. And then there's like Cookies who claims it's cherry pie across the cookies, which is bullshit. They did not make it, so don't believe that.
I don't know. I mean, this one, I think it's going to be, and this is me guessing because I know the jealousy, that plant tends to get really purple at harvest time. So the other 2 phenos got really purple, but this one didn't. So I'm thinking this one's more of a cereal milk leaner, also just because of the plant morphology too. But I don't know how that plant grew.
It finishes green. At least the stuff that I get out here from Cannabiotics, it's pretty green and orange. So
Okay.
You might be in jealousy. I've seen it go almost like black, like super dark purple, like you're saying. So
Yeah.
it is interesting, the genetics, when you see the crosses like that. You get one that leans toward one parent, one leans toward the other, and hopefully that color is maybe indication of some of the other aromas and flavors that make that cultivar really special, in my opinion. I've been looking for it. I actually DM'd the breeder on Instagram. I was just like, hey, your shit's really fucking fire, man. Like, congrats on making that, because I really haven't been able to find shit this good in a long time. But Noah the Grower's got his hand up. So Noah, you want to jump in?
Yeah, totally. I got a bunch of new shit coming down too, and I actually just I have a bunch of seeds from a bunch of guys, a bunch of panel members, and we've just been accumulating them. And one of the first people to hook me up was Kyle, and I actually just popped 3. I guess it's cherry New England rock candy. I have a bunch of stuff, so I popped, and all 3 of them right off the bat came up really, really easily. And I just put them in dirt too. So I mean, they're in plant soil. And then I also got a new platinum Girl Scout Skittles cross, and then I just got like duct tape. I'd run it before, but my room was a little hot at the time, so I'm running it again. And Another one that I'm like interested in getting that I know I can get is pie face. Has anybody ever heard of that or grown that or anything about that?
I've only had a pie face OG. I've never had just pure pie face.
Yeah, pie face OG. Yeah.
So it's pretty good in my the thing is, like, out where I'm at, there's a ton of OGs around. So it was like one of like the 15 that were good. And in my experience wasn't like amazing, so good that I was like dying to have that cut. But that being said, it was, it was fire. It wasn't like I would turn it away or pass on it, I guess, if it was being smoked and like handed around.
You haven't grown it though.
No. I've just got some buddies locally that used to and no longer do.
Nice.
It all just depends. I mean, like, if it's got something that you're looking for, if somebody's grown it local to you and it has like a different flavor or growth pattern or yield, something that makes it stand out, it'd be something worth jumping at, I guess.
Yeah,
Well, you know how it
Kilowatt
goes.
in the-
when people tell me strains, I just loosely believe that it's what it is. It's like, tell me about everything else besides the strain name. That's kind of my opinion now. I'm so jaded.
Yeah.
I feel sort of
I agree.
similarly.
There's so much phenotypic variation amongst the populations that are sort of labeled as being the same strain that, yeah, just because it's called the same, even if it came from the same breeder, it's not necessarily going to be the same expression.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
Though I did want to add that Buddy Kilowatt in the chat, who I did gift a grape ape a little while ago, he says that he has a bunch of plants, 17 ice cream cakes, and one of this grape ape, and everything smells like grape. So I guess it turned out very grapey. He won't know how it smokes though for a little while.
It's always nice when it actually lives up to the name, though. Like grape ape, and it smells like grapes. Ice cream cake, I don't know what that's supposed to smell like, but grape and ice cream cake, I don't know. It seemed like a little bit different. That's a huge pop. That one, ice cream cake, is like what a lot of the Northern California light depth growers are growing. And there's just like, it was one of the things that was being moved. Like there's just packs of ice cream cake going around. And that was like, there's memes about like, oh, I got ice cream cake for 600. I got ice cream cake for 1,000. I got ice cream cake for 1,200, whatever it was, like, and people basically like undercutting each other with the pound prices. And it was unfortunate to see sometimes that happened in Oregon, happens in California, happens kind of a little bit everywhere. If everybody gets the same cut, that's why personally I love popping seeds every time, because even if people are growing the same strain, they don't have your pheno and the expression from your environment and everything that you put into it. So definitely gives you a little bit of an edge in making your product unique and distinguishable from others. Is anybody else looking for grapey stuff? Because if you are, let me know, because I've got fucking tons of grapey gas with Velvet Punch. That's like the one thing I've got in my wheelhouse.
I still got some Velvet Punch seeds because I ended up getting 2 batches. So I got grape covered.
You'll have some F3s coming as soon as my F3 testing is finished in-house here. Anybody who grew the F2s gets the F3s. So
I was just looking at the cut I have, Jack, of that one. The leaves are still crazy serrated, and yeah, when it gets big enough, I'm just gonna put it on, put it into flour, take cuts off of it again. Because that one in particular, I don't remember exactly what that one tasted like, really.
I would guess that there's definitely some grapey notes in there. Most everybody that I sent them to, of the people that grew them, found lots of grape, and it was like either grape or gas or a mix of both, somewhere in between. So that was interesting to see from F1 to F2. That was what kept a lot more than the color, because my F1s were purple like way sooner, and just like more like the total portion of the plant was purple compared to the F2s, where I saw some people getting like a mix of green and purple, where it's kind of like streaked purple but not fully purple, kind of, so to speak. So the purple didn't translate as well as I was hoping it would, but the flavor and aroma, and I think the effects, which were more of like a hybrid, not kind of 2 up or 2 down, kind of shone through for most people.
Yeah, I liked all the girls that I ended up with were good. They're all just a little bit different.
The one sample that I hypothetically allegedly got from you was the sweetest. Like on my spectrum, I thought there was like grape was over here as like the sweetest grapey grape, and then I had like the gassiest, and then yours like watermelon pheno was like overshot my grapey pheno of like, it was even sweeter than I even thought possible. And it's just a good point to see what is possible in other people's gardens outside of your own. Like my garden wasn't able to maybe even produce that expression, but yours definitely brought it out.
It's weird how it, because yeah, I've seen that a lot. It's grown in a different spot. It looks like a different plant, but my one buddy
things. I love
when it
everybody
wasn't
growing everything.
Yeah, it's really cool. My one buddy he checked it out before it was harvested and stuff. He's like, man, it smells like Smarties. That's what he said. I'm pretty sure.
That's what I've always, ever since I tried the Jack Spiked Punch, which was also a purple punch cross from Vegan Doja, when I exhaled, I was like, man, it's got that Smarties flavor like on my tongue. And I love that. It's a good flavor and it is reminiscent and has good effect along with it as well. So I don't know if it's from that flavor that has a good effect, but it just seems to be pretty calming and relaxing. But so I think Spartan said his phenos were more uplifting. So
Yeah,
everybody's chemistry is different.
Yeah, and I find it's half and half with me. Like with people, half the time they'll be, yep, that was the same with me. And then the other half, like I know there's one guy at work, it's almost always opposite. So if it's sedative for him, it's gonna bring me up. I don't know. That's weird.
I would wonder if maybe it's just like how your CB1 and CB2 are wired and like what terpenes and cannabinoids stimulate you versus him and things like that. I'm sure in 20 or 30 years, they're going to figure that stuff out when we actually get full federal medical licenses to look at this realistically, how we should be able to. Right now, it's still kind of, because we're not legal in all 50 states, we don't have true medical work being done here in the US.
Yeah, and on top of that, they don't have actually good quality cannabis that they're using in the test either. So that's another big one. So that'll be cool.
And like even their ingestion methods, like I've seen this video and a lot of you may have seen it passed around where there's like an old lady who gets like 100 joints a month or something in like a steel tin, and they're from the government, like grown in Mississippi, and it's like really shitty, like 15% or lower, and then it's like ground up, and they've just had it, like they look at the tins and it's like year-old product, like several years old in some cases.
That's kind of what I'm talking about. That's the government stuff that the government's getting, so that's what they use in their tests. Yeah, I'm sure there's somewhere that would be able to go. Maybe in legal states they're able to go.
I would
dispose now and get it now. I'm not sure how it all works.
I would venture to guess that the government has the best weed in the world, but they only release the shit. I'm telling you, I bet you money. I bet your military has.
I'll tell you this
from what I've seen of government, man. I'd really.
Yeah, you're right.
Frank Gigax got busted, and his stuff tested so much higher than everything else that they were growing at the time that they started taking his cuts. Because when people were getting busted with his shit in the streets, first of all, they're like, this shit's testing way higher than our most potent shit ever that we had locked up, like their G13 or whatever they had locked away. It's supposed to be the most potent thing ever. They could only get like 15% THC out of it. His stuff was testing 20 to 25% THC. So when he finally got busted, they're like, what is he working with? And it was honestly that he was growing it better, and he had just mixed the genetics together over and over a few times and found a few winners or whatever. But I think it was kind of dumb luck in his situation, because he really went from like first time grower to full on warehouses and just like failed a few grows, but was making enough money in his professional life that he was able to like fail those couple times. And then it's like, oh, let's just do it this way and optimize it more and more. And at that time, the prices were, you were getting 7,000 plus a pound. You had a lot of wiggle room with the margins there. So yeah, I don't think the government grows the best cannabis or has access to it. I agree with Spartan.
Yeah, I think you probably,
breeding is either, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe not directly, but like if they find that a plant that cures cancer immediately or some, I don't know. There's a lot about our government.
I would tend to believe that they would destroy it, not keep it around.
I don't know. I think people
more like
would,
our government.
Well,
perhaps, but I think people are. I like to think it's the opposite. That people would want to get it, if only for their own.
Well, that is the case. That's the case.
Renown.
That's the whole story of cannabis.
It would depend on who owned it.
And who could have control over that enforcement
from it?
But who could enforce that control?
We're drifting like ways. My point was just going to be that, you know, breeding is a product, either like good breeding and successful breeding is either a product of passion and effort and like passion, or it's the result of sort of a massive scientific research effort. And I don't think that the government has really done either of those towards breeding cannabis the way that you would have to. And I'm not surprised that passionate breeders working throughout time could break through those barriers in a better way. People that really cared about the plant.
Well, and he did what I'm doing. He stood on the shoulders of giants like Vegan Doja DNA, who sent me the Velvet Punch. Everybody loves to give me credit for it. I didn't do shit. I just F2'd it. I sent out a bunch of testers to my friends because I asked him if it was okay to do that. And he's like, yeah, sure. And then people give me the credit for it. But it's like it was somebody else's work. With the Frank Gigak story, he was ordering it from Neville, and Neville got work from himself that he was a breeder of everything from birds when he was a kid to cannabis plants. But he worked with like Sam the Skunk Man. He worked with Ben Dronkers and guys over at Sensi Seeds and Shanti Baba. So not only was he passionate, like Dr. MJ was just talking about, and bred for years and years and years and collected genetics from literally all around the world. Like he went to Afghanistan and different countries where he was hand collecting seeds, growing them and selecting the best ones out of like giant field grows and narrowing it down. Then he was able to send packs off all over to guys like Frank Gigax who could benefit from his passionate work. And I think that's how a lot of growers are. That's why I think a lot of people are actually not getting into breeding, is they're like, I'll leave that to professionals, and let the people that are super passionate about that do that. And then I'll just grow their fucking fire, which I have a lot of respect for that. I think more people should be growing, and to put the onus of breeding on top of it is a huge challenge. So I'm glad that there are lots of good breeders out there, but there's also lots of people just taking advantage of the good breeders' work and relabeling and stepping on their stuff. So it's good to be diligent, do lots of research always. Do we have any good questions from the chat? Anybody? I haven't seen anybody tag me other than saying hello and cheers. So cheers to everybody in the chat. I saw Crispy Wannabe earlier and Smart Poker, Crack Babies DWC, lots of regulars. Max Grim and Ruby got his own show, also regular listener. So cheers to everybody else that I didn't mention.
Must be buds. Good to see you. Yeah, I've been hitting the fucking bong a little bit too quickly. I'm already pretty elevated, so I'm already doing pretty good. I don't know about you guys.
What are you toking on?
That Orange Dream Haze. It's weird. It's I wonder what, I know it's a renamed pheno of it. I don't know what the real strain is, but it's super orangey, not like a clementine orange, but like a navel orange. And then on the back end, it's like pine. And it's fucking, what's crazy to me is all the other strains I've ever grown that were citrusy, that the terp seems to fade, that citrus terp seems to fade fairly quickly. This thing hangs around forever. So I don't know.
That sounds really attractive.
Yeah,
That's a great trait. I wonder if it's not just limonene. Maybe there's other, like valencine is in oranges, so that could be another terpene that's in there, and maybe other like volatiles that are also found in oranges might be sticking around, because maybe the limonene is, I know limonene is pretty volatile, but maybe some of the other ones are just a little bit stickier, or it's just in a high enough amount that even if you're volatilizing 0.5%, if you got like 5% to start, you have 4.5% terps, it's gonna be like, damn it still smells good. Is it one that lasts through the end of the bowl? Like if you hit a bowl a couple times, you can still taste it, or a joint?
I can put it in a fucking dirty bowl and taste the oranges. And it's fucking, man, there's not much I can have it. You can do that.
That's like a Brandon Russ test. He's got some, no offense, Brandon, I love you. You got some dirty ass bongs over there sometimes, at least when I went over.
Oh, wow.
The limarilla, you could taste it through it. So that's the sign. Like if you have some really dank shit, it's gonna come through.
His limelights, I got some right here. They're the same way. They fucking go right to the, well, there's not much left.
He's like
honestly,
a terp
it's
fiend.
a great test.
Brandon has the terpiest shit of anybody, like in person, of anybody that I've come across. His shit is terpier than anybody. Like if there's actually a terp king crown, he has the numbers. I haven't seen anybody else test 12% terpenes on a single strain of flower.
That's pretty crazy.
6% is pretty regular for him though.
The boys in the UK said that that Agent Orange, when they smoke that, then everything after that tastes like oranges, unless they like get crazy clean in it.
Oh yeah, it like coats your bong. the flavor from the Agent Orange is definitely, it's interesting how it can do that. But I guess that's why it's, able to be used in cleaners and things like that.
Maybe that's what this is. This guy says an old cut from Florida. That's all I got from him. And maybe it's an Agent Orange cut.
There's a place in Florida called Orange Blossom Trail in the Orlando area where I spent a little bit of time when I met the Lady Greenstock. And there's a lot of things other than cannabis that get moved over there, but cannabis is also one of those things. And I think Noah the Grower actually has grown an orange blossom strain. Isn't that right, Noah? I think you had a cut called Orange Blossom.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of my first original strains. I was growing, I guess, like 12 years ago. That, like strawberry ice. I had a bunch of just really old school stuff, and I kept that orange blossom around for a long time. But sometimes you just kind of get a little stagnant. That's why I got a bunch of new stuff coming down, and you kind of want to just stay, with ahead of the terps. And
What
just
was
try
the
something
orange?
new.
What was the orange blossom like? Was it like tangerine or real orange or?
Yeah, it was, and it was a super heavy yielder. Dude, I'll post some pictures. I got some buds in there that are so big of that, and that's why I kept it around. It was a really heavy yielder. It was the kind of plant that when you trim it, like, I mean, you literally had to like the scissor hash, like sticky scissor hash. It was a really good strain. It just,
I like that.
you know,
too.
yeah, I just got really kind of stagnant. I grew it for maybe 9 years or something.
I
And
was
then
just gonna
actually-
say, man, you're selling this fucking thing. Why did you get rid of it?
Oh, dude, and then listen. Then I gave it back to a friend, and then I gave it to a friend, and then I got it back. And when I got it back, of course, I got Thrip, and it took me so long, and I finally just got tired of messing with it and cut everything down, and like got told from another guy and started back over again because I just didn't want to mess with it no more. So that was a rough one. I also lost a really good Hawaiian haze plant to spider mites from getting a freaking LA Confidential clone from somebody else. So I will second that. Hey man, getting those clones, especially if you don't know what you're doing or you don't know what you're looking for, that can be a disaster, man. So be careful.
Quarantine them. And Matthew, what's the because I know you have some great videos, pest primers for thrips and for spider mites. If you could give, like, I usually watch the last, I don't know, minute and a half, 2 minutes of the video most intently, because that's where you're like, the whole rest of the video, you're describing it, how quick it reproduces, what its name is, all that other stuff. But then at the end, you're like, here are the ways to treat it. There's this spray, there's this predator. So I don't know if you have that just like off the top of your head, or if you can reference some notes. But for anybody like Noah who's had to garden lost to thrips and or spider mites, what are the kind of main 1-2 punches or combination?
I mean, you know me, I like to talk about a bunch of subjects that you can have a more a better reference for things, and perhaps even be clever, because farmers and cultivators are so dang clever if they know what they're dealing with and why and how. But basically, long story short, spider mites.
I like it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And and also usually it's just helpful to attack every life stage, and sometimes you got to change it up a little bit for different ones. That's why they're so successful, right? But spider mites, thrips, things that can affect both of those things are like those botanical insecticides people like to use. I always like to mention things like azadirachtin and pyrethrin and that sort of thing. But you got to be careful. And whenever I mention pyrethrin in particular, there's an understandable concern. But I'm not talking about permethrin. I'm talking about pyrethrin. And I know they sound very similar, and indeed chemically they are in similar classes. But one of them is a synthetic, which is permethrin. The other one's pyrethrin, which is a natural compound. But it does negatively affect them. You can also use things like sulfur, like I know Spartan loves to use as well. But of course in flour, not so much. For thrips and spider mites, I also really like to use predatory mites too. But it's very much more useful if you catch it early, and you sort of inundate your crops with these mites. For spider mites, I like to use Persimilus mites, but there are other spider mite predators you can buy. I just like those the most. I had the best effect with them, and I usually like to put like 200 to 300 per square meter, whatever that adds up to your situation. And for a home grower, that should be really simple, because you don't have too many square meters for a lot of people.
How often, Matthew? Because I know, like, in an IPM setting, that those things aren't going to survive. I don't know how long they live. How long do they live? Because how long would you have to keep reapplying Persimilus if that was your only IP? I know you're supposed to do more than one, but if you're doing one, and that's Persimilus, and how often would you reapply those?
Yeah. So essentially, it really just depends on what you see after, sort of after application. I find that if somebody applies, like, of course, it's a factor of kind of how much foliage you have a little bit, and also how many spider mites you're dealing with. And so if we use like a proxy, like say, let's say 1 to 5 mites in a sample of like 5 leaves on your plant, and it's like a mature plant, there's a bunch of leaves. Let's say you have like a moderate maybe level of spider mites that's going to tick up pretty soon. Then I would say like 200 to 300 per meter squared is a good amount. And then if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, if the temperatures and the humidity is conducive and you're not spraying other things that can disrupt them and that sort of a thing, I would say that you can probably get away with an application of maybe one or maybe even two more after that. It just kind of depends. And if you're dealing with a very small, the smaller the space, the more of like a multiplicative effect that the numbers of persimilis is going to have, because they're just going to crawl all over that plant and be searching sort of passively, so you don't have to spray anything, in that setting as much for the spider mite specifically. For the thrips, you have other options like cucumeris or Swirsky, which I love to use and you love to use as well. I think Californicus can also aggress them as well, but I tend to like to use the cucumeris and Swirsky because, at least for cucumeris, I think it tends to be a little bit cheaper, although that can definitely vary. And I also like to use about the same amount of them.
Oh, dude, it's a huge difference at Copert. I can attest to that for sure, at least at commercial level. For the same price that we get all the other predators, which is 100 of them, for the same exact price, we get 500 of the cucumeris. That's sachets.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. Actually, you brought up a really great point that I didn't even articulate, which is, are we talking about sachets or bulks? With persimilis, there are bulk or blister packs out there, but there's also, and people are moving to using like kind of like a sachet system, which is great, honestly. For a long time, that wasn't really a viable option. So that's kind of a new thing. If people haven't used biocontrols in a while and they want to try to use them again, that might be a good idea for the persimilis. And also for the Swirsky and the cucumeris, you can use them bulk released or in sachets. I like to use bulk if it's cheaper and you get like this sort of overwhelming number. I like to do that usually. But if you're in flower, strongly recommend against it unless you can apply them into like a cup or some other sort of receptacle and then kind of place it into the branches or on a hook or something like that, so they can crawl out and find their way.
We've got a bunch of those, but they're downstairs.
So you could almost like make those little things. It's just like a little hanging cardboard box or something like that just hooks around the plant.
I don't think you need to shell out a bunch of money for it, to be honest.
No.
Like I know they're available and you could get it for simplicity's sake, but I don't know if it's worth the money usually for people.
I had a question about applying the actual predators that kind of came up as we were talking, and that would be how long after a knockdown spray, whatever, I guess maybe different knockdown sprays would be different, but like if you sprayed sulfur, how long are you going to wait after to apply your predators? And would there be any like risk to apply them like same day, same hour type thing?
I've had people who've done it, as you say, where they don't wait and it has worked out for them. But I usually ideally wait at least 3, maybe 4 days between like a sulfur application, a wettable sulfur application, and predatory mites. And people also ask me if you have to like wash off the sulfur. If it's like regular wettable sulfur and it's at the right like levels, usually I find that to be fine and not necessary. But sometimes there are complications that are sort of unique to your context. I think high heat would be probably the biggest one in my mind. Or if you have some sort of an adjuvant.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Another question I had though to follow up was, you were talking about earlier with like seeing 1 to 5 spider mites per leaf, you'd apply a roughly 200 per meter, 200 to 300 per meter, I think was what your quote there was. But if you had more than that, if they were more progressed in a later stage, you might, if you're seeing 10 spider mites or 20 spider mites per leaf, is it too late at that point to approach with IPM of predators, or would you just increase the volume, kind of like larger army to defeat the larger number?
Yeah, I don't think that it's not a lost hope. I feel like what really it comes down to is like the stage of the plant's maturity. So that's kind of a logistical question. And then also, because like I know growers, this is not in a cannabis sort of context, but there are definitely people who will apply more persimilis or whatever, like in strawberries, they're very popularly applied with drones actually. They'll get like a pretty significant amount for their strawberry plants, but it's really just the long game. You're trying to inoculate them in a large field, and they even go at a larger level and they applied them kind of equally. So in my opinion, I think that even if you had like a greater amount, you might maybe bump it up to 400. But at that point, I think it's less about like the amount you apply at once, as much as it would be like, because you could probably still get away with like 200 to 300 per square meter, and then apply it like for sure twice, like just order once and then like plan to order it again. But look at your plants in the interim and kind of see. You always got to see, because you can't just assume that it'll work. I don't mean that because the biocontrols are very finicky, but more so because like there just might be a complication you're not considering. So constant vigilance is essential.
I saw an interesting post. It was not cannabis, but I think it was Monstera. Somebody took a cutting that had thrips attacking it, and they put it into an isolated, like a pod with just basically peat moss in the bottom, and they had like their healthy cuts in there, or maybe it was the cut that was eaten up by thrips, and then it started growing new healthy stuff that wasn't attacked by the thrips, and they just kept it isolated. If you isolate and just trap something in, is there a chance that just by isolating it, the thrips will basically run their course and not have enough, I don't know, food or something? Like, I don't know what would have caused them to, it didn't seem like they treated it with anything, but it just got better by isolating it and putting it in a little container.
Yeah, I don't have any explanation for that, because they're herbivorous and they feed on the plant cells.
That was kind of my thought. I was like, what's the mechanism for this working? Like, it just seems like if there was a plant in there, it's going to keep eating and reproducing, right? So
Maybe they flooded it with CO2.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, perhaps.
There's this research report I remember reading a long time ago, where it was about mealybugs, and they called it I think they called it like insecticide induced stupefaction, like to be stupefied. And apparently, if I'm remembering right, apparently the insecticidal agent basically slows down their metabolism or something, or maybe they're using CO2 and that's why I'm remembered of this, but they did something that slowed down the metabolism, and then the toxin that they were trying to use actually was less effective, because it's like trying to put somebody into a catatonic state, like after like venom, for example. So like it slows their heart rate, so it doesn't move around their body as much. And that's just a funny name. So you've reminded me that. I don't know. I can't remember the details, but anyways.
That is interesting. It makes sense though. Like if you're not as active, it's not going to cycle through you as quickly, and then it won't be as effective at doing what it's doing. Another grow, you've got your hand up over there. And
yeah, I just wanted to ask Matthew, what would you recommend? A buddy of mine asked me this the other day, and I should ask while we're on the subject. What would you recommend for thrips in like a flower room? You know what I mean? Like something that you couldn't really spray a whole lot. So some of these bio stuff you were talking about, or is there something in particular you would like recommend?
Yeah, definitely the bios. And a big part of that really just comes down to not only because you don't want to foul your flower, but also because coverage is so important. And I should probably make a video or something about it, sort of addressing this more precisely. But like the number one problem with applying any sort of pesticidal agent is, first of all, did you use the right kind? But second of all, right after that is, did you get the coverage? And so with biocontrols, you can kind of eliminate that to a degree, as long as you apply the right amount. And I like to use like cucumeris, for example, for the Western flower thrips, which are super common on cannabis, because they can get in all the little nooks and crannies. And I think it's specifically for Western flower thrips and other similar thrips, they actually they lay their eggs in the plant tissue, not on top of it. So I've talked about this before, but basically thrips are super good at getting into different plants globally, horticulturally. The horticulture and agriculture trades are the reason why these thrips are, some of them anyways, have gotten to be so common and exposed to so many different environments. And that's part of the reason they can put the egg in the plant, or like a clone or a cutting, and everything looks fine. And then, a few days later, a week later or whatever, suddenly you have thrips, and there's no explanation, but that's the explanation. Or it came outside, that's also a possibility, but that happens too.
Matthew, will any of the soil biocontrols help with thrips at all? Like for example, like in maybe a nematode or Stratiolopus simitus or whatever the fuck it is.
Absolutely. And I think that gets back to what we were saying earlier about the life stages if you can attack them. Because I like the cucumbers because they will stay in the foliage, and they'll also sometimes go, believe it or not, they're actually considered a soil predator,
Wow.
or a leaf
I didn't
litter
know that.
predator. Yeah, but they love the foliage and they also love the litter. So they'll go up and down. But the Stridulalaps or the Hypoaspis predatory mites, they're great because they'll also go after the pupae when they fall down into the soil or onto the ground. Nematodes are also really good. I've heard in some cases people will use them, not necessarily in cannabis, but into foliage. But there's some tricky ways to do that. I don't like to use it personally this way. I don't think it's the most effective for sure, but you can apply it into the substrate and really lock down not just Thrips pupae, but also fungus gnat larvae. So that'd be like the Steiner Nema Feliciae. Those SF nematodes are really great for that kind of a thing.
Yeah, we apply them like every 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. Like it's just worth it, in my opinion.
They're so cheap. Yeah, they're definitely.
Yeah, you get
Matthew,
like billions. Yes.
is there any particular beneficial that is bad to over apply, or is it for any reason?
I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, I would say that maybe not necessarily as like a target, like that it would like harm your plants as much, but
Just your pocketbook.
Huh?
I said just your pocketbook.
Yeah,
Cost.
your pocket.
Cost
your
is the only
pocketbook.
reason.
A pocketbook's a big one, but I would also, I take the time to say a little bit about the environment and how, even though my beloved Beauveria fungal pathogen, which I love to use for so many things, if you're not careful, I mean, it's ubiquitous in the environment and it's a cosmopolitan species, but I still feel like people should be careful to apply biocontrols. If you over apply them, yes, it'll be really expensive and not necessary, but you might also you could have negative effects on the local ecology. It's not impossible. It's not outlandish to say that. I'm not trying to say that people using biocontrols are hurting the environment. In fact, a lot of times it's better than using a chemical agent, but still within reason is probably best.
Everything with moderation, right? And I had to laugh at the chat for a little bit because Aldi, I think it formerly Aldrich 25 said you have to take up his tech for IPM, which is going to the garden straight from the shower, no towel, buck naked, in your birthday suit, just getting in there. Not going to bring anything into the garden like that. So cheers, Aldi. That was an interesting comment.
Then that I think this is an interesting IPM I like from Thunder Dan. Thunder Dan says, I like sacrificing different bugs in front of the Thunderdome so all the other bugs know it's not a safe place for them, Aztec style. I'm liking
you
that.
Gotta get you gotta get a spider right in the corner and you just fling the bugs into the web, and it's like it's
there you go. There you go.
I feel like a sticky trap is kind of like that, if like they just start seeing enough of them die on that car, they're like, oh shit, this isn't a fun place to hang around.
I saw a video from I think the Rock Dam Institute or whatever, and on YouTube, and from 10 years ago, but it was an aphid alarm pheromone, and they secreted it on a leaf where all these aphids were on. And they immediately started to get out of the leaf and just move around and get away from it, and it was instantly. And there's probably some beneficial effect we could get from that potentially.
Animals are definitely highly impacted by pheromones. My cat just had an emergency and it had to go to the vet, and the other cat, who's its litter mate, they've lived with each other for 4 years, is now rejecting that cat since it came home. And my mother-in-law is it's probably because all those stressed out pheromones from those other cats and animals and shit that kind of gather on that pet when it goes to the vet and comes home, and the other one smells it and it's like, that's not the fucking thing I know, and it freaks it out. But we have a good question from the chat from We Never Killed Kenny. Great name, I love that. Sheep Home Grow, what is the panel's opinion on breeders doing line breeding? Do you guys think it will get more popular in the future, or will it be more polyhybrid breeding like it is now? I think in the short term, we're going to see a lot of polyhybrid breeding. I think most people, I actually got flamed on Twitter for asking the question. I was like, this person's like, how much should you charge for an F1? And I was like, well, are you talking about an actual F1 or a polyhybrid, like a first cross? And,
Ooh.
I was legitimately
It's a good question. No,
because
it's a great question.
It's a different thing that you're buying, right? If you get an Afghani cross to a Thai versus a cookie cross to a cookie, you can call them both F1s, but you're getting a very different product. So
right.
I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just but they didn't consider that there is anything corn breeding, where you could get it to be like an inbred line and then actually have true F1s. Like to them, an F1 is anything that you took initial cross, one to the other. So, and if you look into it, it becomes a semantic argument, right? How do you want to define filial breeding? And some people don't define it as like how corn breeders do. So it just depends on which circle you're in. So
yeah, there's reasons to do line breeding, and there's, I mean, to the extent that we're ever going to have sort of stable strains, that, like, getting back to the earlier point we made about, knowing the strain name doesn't tell you really a lot. That kind of stability comes from working a line, either through inbreeding the line or through, open pollination. So there's a reason for that. There's a short-term gain usually from hybridizing, sort of regardless whether they're true sort of, separate lines that you're crossing or just other hybrids that you're crossing. And so in the short term, I think it's always easier to go the polyhybridization route. Getting stable lines to do any kind of breeding with requires a big investment in time. And the payout, if there is any, is much longer down the road. So I think that that's one of the obstacles. But I do think that there's significant payouts to potentially be achieved by dedicated research in line breeding in cannabis and then crossing those lines.
I think because this is such a new burgeoning industry and there's going to be more and more interest in it, there's going to be such a huge demand for seed that it's going to continue because of that demand. What's going on now is just going to increase, I think, for a while. There's still people that are doing line breeding though. Look at DJ Short. How far is his blueberry now? At least past F5.
Yeah, he F4, but he like kind of breeds with the
split
F4
it into
male.
he split into two lines too, two work lines at the same time, I guess.
Right. So he basically did kind of like some people do. They put in like a decade of work into like making a male and like making a few lines, and then like he keeps that male and then reproduces a stable seed line from there that people want, which is blueberry and flow as his main ones, but he's got other ones out there too.
So yes, I think it's going to continue kind of like that. You're going to see your probably 10% of breeders doing things like that because it's just a passion project to them. And they're, they seem already established in the market and they don't really need to. But there's going to be a million Instagram breeders out there throwing two things together and calling it whatever.
And not to say that can't be fire too. Like
100%
Masonic,
it can be fire. Masonic
people like love him and hate him. He, in my understanding of the situation, kind of got famous for his memes, and then people started buying his seeds. He literally crossed his male Wilson to everything. Like his ideology is Wilson X fucking everything. Literally, he just gets every single cut he can get his hands on. He's like, I want to see how Wilson works with everything, and puts it out there. And some people find really fire stuff. A lot of people do find intersex traits and complain, and like maybe I'll just block them and like meme on them. And like, I don't think it's the healthiest back and forth necessarily all the time, but I do think that he's built a big name for himself, and a lot of people respect him as like a high up there breeder. And he basically started with just like a male in his backyard in Compton, hitting every single clone that he could get at every single dispensary he could go to. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then you've got like the DJ Shorts and like the vegan dojas who put like a decade in, and like you don't hear anything until their stuff is like worked to the way that they want it and put it out. And there's going to be everything in between. I'm totally with you, Spartan. We're going to see more of both. We're going to see more people like copycats who are just going to take the exact same strain, call it the same thing under their banner. And then there are going to be people that change the name. You could hear my cats hissing in the background. Sorry about that. I was just talking about the pheromone. So we're reintegrating them slowly. It's fitting.
She's listening to the conversation. She's getting pissed about it. She doesn't like hearing about breeders like that.
She's like, yeah, I don't like those copycats. Fuck them. Go with the real breeders. Pay a little extra. Get the amiaces from Tao, not from some European seed bank that claims they have amiaces.
To me, it's like it's like I've been reading a lot about things like social proof, and I always find that kind of stuff fascinating. And like, because it's the dark arts marketing and how that kind of comes into play. Admittedly, I am not a guru about that sort of a thing, but I definitely feel like it's at a certain point, people don't even have to do that. It seems like, certainly it's been my experience that for a lot of people, as long as you have like a really cool name and some cool graphics and maybe some level of like notoriety, there's going to be a selection of people who will maybe enjoy your particular niche. And, none of that we're talking about even enters into the equation, which to me is unfortunate, but I get it, I guess.
Well, like the marketing angle?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, because also a lot of these people that we're talking about, they have a social media presence to some degree. And so much of the sort of culture and community, I feel like, is well, I mean, people don't necessarily understand how breeding works even. So they're really kind of relying on other people who are selling them stuff as a proxy. And you and I have both talked about that at length, about how that there are some inherent problems with that. So, I mean, but people don't really care. People are
the
intellectual
consumer's
misers.
The consumer's not terribly educated. I mean, that's all of us, basically, right?
To be honest,
in terms of what we should be getting, and the sample sizes are always small. It's weird. I mean, I think with a lot of other products, if you tried to came to market with something and said that it was, one product and there was as much actual variation in the product, in the consumer's experience, that would blow back. But there's reasons that it never does in cannabis seed marketing in particular.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and also kind of like, to me, a little bit scary. I don't know if that's the right adjective, but it definitely, I don't know. I feel like it opens you up to being misled quite a bit. And
and there's some breeders that do mislead intentionally, and there's other breeders, I think, that mislead just because they also don't fully understand sort of what's going on. There's not a huge barrier to entry in that game.
Well, I think
Very
there's people that are like optimistic, and like maybe something grows really well in their environment, and they're going to say, ideally, you could harvest this or 8 weeks because like it might look ready or look done, or maybe they've harvested it once there and consumed it and they were happy with that product,
right?
But maybe somebody else wouldn't be.
Or like I'm thinking of the example of selling selfs, right? S1s, and oftentimes the customer is led to believe that it's the same. It'll be the same type of plant that the parent would be. And sometimes I think the breeder knows better and lets the customer believe that anyways. And other times I don't think the breeder really knows better. I think the breeder is also under that impression. So with a lot of issues like that, it's both the consumers and the vendors are often amateurs at it. So
the consumers are letting like, they don't care if there's harms. I've heard people say, I don't care if there's harms in the pack. I'll either cut them down or pluck off the male flowers. I would never want that, I don't, that don't work.
Yeah.
Matthew, I have a quick question for you that I think you could answer.
He's just teasing you.
But the question fell into the dark hole.
They don't want us to know.
Did I freeze? Fuck.
You froze.
You're back now.
All right. It says the
internet does not want you to say the question, man. You're being censored.
His name is Truth Serum too, so it's a good one.
I already I think I answered that question already, Jack.
Was it in chat or was it on the actual podcast?
Oh, in chat.
Okay, so just for the listeners, Truth Serum says, how much is too much diatomaceous earth? I just started using it.
Yeah, and then further down he says that they're using it in their topsoil, and in my experience, diatomaceous earth, like if it gets moist, it degrades and isn't effective in the way it's supposed to be. So the reason why diatomaceous earth works the way that it does is that it's so diatoms in the ocean have a silicon sort of like shell. So we've taken that shell and we've broken it up into like glass shards, essentially. And so when the exoskeleton of an insect or whatever, moves across it, those shards pierce, kind of like a suit and armor sort of situation where, you can't pierce through the armor as easy as you can pierce through like the armpit or the wrist or wherever where the joints are. And so that's really problematic for something with an armor sort of body type. And it discourages or damages and otherwise degrades pest ingress. But if it gets moist, then that doesn't happen. So, I mean, I don't think you have a toxicological concern to worry about as much as like a logistical one. That's why people usually use it like kind of on like a dry surface, like where you expect ants to come in through a crack or something like that.
Like around your pots rather than in them.
Yeah, but I've had many people say that they apply it to their substrate and that it has seemingly worked out well for them.
Yeah, and if you
But I don't
you
have.
can bottom water that way. That, you know, there's ways around it. You bottom
People
water.
use sand too. They'll use a layer of
Yes.
sand to create like a mulch, and then they'll top the sand with diatomaceous earth, because then they're physically going to have to like crawl through the sand to get to your media. And if it's dry sand with diatomaceous earth, they're going to rip their like shoulders and hands and stuff off
Okay.
while they're trying to dig. Essentially,
She said,
like Matthew
okay.
described.
Also, she wanted to make sure you know it was a she, and she said she's letting the soil dry out and then applying for ants. Literally hit ants.
Well, there you go.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I'll go around
so-
the pot as well, though, especially ants, because they're crawling in that way. So go around the pot also. You don't have to worry about that being ineffective because it can stay dry, hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that recommendation. And also, you know, of course, be careful because like I've definitely seen it where ants will like, because the scouts aren't really communicating with each other. So they're just finding a way so they can get onto the foliage from another location or from some other material. And that's definitely happened before too. So yeah, just be careful if like your foliage is touching because they might be able to move across it that way.
So we have a follow-up question if we feel like we sufficiently answered that, which I do think that we did. They say, I don't even get who it was from, but it was from, God, it's like a real weird one to pronounce, Earl something, but Aldi re-recommended it. So another viewer requested this question gets answered. Say, what are 5 things a learning grower can do to increase yield and reduce plant stress? Plant and personal. So I guess since there are 6 of us, you'll get 6 things. We'll all give at least one thing that you can do. And I'll pass it first to Spartan.
Oh, thank God, make it easy. I'm going to say vapor pressure deficit, man. Look into vapor pressure deficit. And what that does is it kind of forces you to make sure that the environment around the plant is in such a way to where the plant can transpire enough to get to your goal. When your plant transpires, that's how it can build mass. That's what you're wanting it to do. So follow the VPD and try to stay within your targets on VPD. And that's the biggest kind of new science kind of when it comes to home growing is the VPD. There's tons of information out there, so I won't bore you with it, but look into VPD, vapor pressure deficit.
Good general starting place to get the environment dialed in. Noah, do you have any tips? The question again was, what are 5 things a learning grower can do to increase yield or reduce plant stress? Noah.
Well, I always tell everybody that the first thing when somebody tells me they have some type of issue in their garden, I'll go just flat out environment. You got to get your humidity, you got to get your temperature right. You want your flower temperature to be, unless you have CO2 or something, you want it to be, mid 70s or lower. You want your humidity to be like 45 or lower in flower. So those would be the 2 that once I got my stuff under control, my garden was 10 times better. So that's what I would say. If I was wanting my yield to go up and I wanted something to do in flower, I'd make sure that my environment was right.
Good advice. Also kind of echoes what Spartan was hinting at. So maybe it doubles down on why it's so important, but the American one, maybe you could tack on.
All right. So we want to increase yield and lower plant stress.
Or stress. They say plant and personal in parentheses.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, there you go. So my advice would be realistic and be logistic with your numbers of your plants, because personally, I start way too many. I take way too many cuts, and I don't have the room for them. So the plant starts to stress. And when the plant starts to stress, you start to stress. And then it kind of can start a snowball effect, which you don't want. So first off, you should know your areas and how many plants you want to put in, and what's his face, Medicropper. I saw this. Medicropper brought this up once, and I'll give him credit. It's just simple fucking math. If you need 100 plants, you got to prepare to have 100 plants ready for when you need them, and you just do the math, how long it takes to make the cuts and all that. But I'm digressing. So yeah, just be realistic with the numbers, I think, is my advice to learn and grow, because especially when you first start and then you get that, you're all excited, you get crazy. Well, and it never left me. I get crazy all the time. So yeah, I'm trying to reel that in.
Tao always wants more plants and more space.
That is great advice.
Yeah, I mean, don't take on more than you can handle.
You can keep the plants way happier if they're in a happy environment, so what happens is you have an army and or whatever, a stadium, and you only have enough room to keep the real plants happy. There's a certain area that they're happy. Then when you have extra ones, you put them on the outside, and they keep going further and further out, and they get less and less love and light, and then they start to suffer and they get stressed. So yeah.
You go in there and you chop their heads off, make them clones, and you reset them all.
Right. Well, then
much better.
if the one way on the outside, you got to get it better to take cuts off of it, because you can't be taking ugly cuts. So yeah, I'm working on that all the time.
It's funny you say that, the American one, because I know when I taught my barber to grow, it was on a very personal scale, just like a tent and then a small veg area. And when he had some buddies who have a larger, kind of more commercial operation in the grayish market here, they have a bunch of lights and like a huge operation. And he asked him, he's like, oh, so like, where's your like head stash? Where's like the personal stuff, like the good shit for yourself? Like, this is like the, commercial area, right? But like, do you have like a strain that maybe like flowers longer? And the dude was like offended because he's like, this is all I fucking have. He looked at it all. He believed that even though he was commercial, everything was like still craft. But my barber who was growing it himself, he's like, I'm fucking new at this, but my shit is looking better than yours. So like, yeah, it was just so funny to me that he wasn't trying to be mean, but that just was truly how he felt, I guess. And it shows that like what the American one said is great advice, because if you take on too much and you can't handle it, your quality is going to suffer. Where if you just keep it a little bit more attainable scale, you can have happier plants that will produce more and better quality. So even in a smaller space with a fewer number, if that's what you can handle, that's what you can handle. But I want to pass it next to Dr. MJ and ask if you could add on. We're trying to get to 5. We've got 3 so far.
Got 3 so far. I mean, I could do more than 1, but my 1, 5 things to increase yield. The yield comes from the light. So making sure that you have adequate light and that the light is sort of well distributed across the space. The quantity of light is more important than any of the qualities of light necessarily, especially when you're already dealing with grow lights. But a lot of growers will sort of, especially if you're underlit, you're gonna just not be able to reach the potential, and you're not going to be able to get as good of quality buds if your densities aren't high enough. So that would be my 1 thing, but
that's huge.
I'll let Matthew go.
You definitely can't get around the physics of it, right? I mean, there has to be light to create the energy to make the plants grow. So that's a huge one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the yield comes from the light. So there's a direct relationship there. And you can't just keep increasing the light either. There's a maximum amount of light that the plants can harvest, but you want to be operating in that range, sort of the maximum production range between 700, 800 ppfd, somewhere in there at all points in the canopy, to really sort of maximize the production in that space.
That's a great point. And I guess for number 5, I'll pass it over to Matthew Gates.
And so the original question was, how do you reduce stress for yourself and also the plant, right? And
then also or increase yield. So it's kind of like a 2-parter. What are 5 ways you can increase yield while reducing stress of the plants and yourself?
Well, I just posted on my Instagram about a paper that talked about spider mites and how their colonization of cannabis plants increased quite a bit. Various terpene content in the plants that were experimented on. Not that I'm saying you should, use them in this capacity, but I think it speaks to a point that one thing that you can do to increase yield, by which I mean of the compounds that you're trying to get, cannabinoids too were affected, is to sort of prime the immune system potentially. Now, to be honest, there's various ways you can do that, and you got to be careful because even something that seems innocuous can have a negative effect on certain pests, or rather on your plant's ability to grow in certain ways, because what you're doing is you're essentially making the plant, through their reception of those compounds that will prime them, you're making it go and grow in one direction instead of growing in another direction. So defense related versus like, or differentiation, you might say, versus like, like actual vegetative growth and that kind of a thing. So there's a trade-off there. But if you're trying to prime against something that you're going to have a negative effect with, or if you're just trying to get the plant to produce defense compounds that you also enjoy, like terpenes and cannabinoids and such, then that's something that you can do potentially. And then also to reduce stress, simply going into your plants, and this is an easy one, just looking at them. Take samples, take random samples. If you have a few plants, take samples from all of them. Look into the foliage, look at the soil, into the branches, into the leaves. Become very familiar, and don't assume that your cultivation space is Fort Knox, because it's probably not, even if you're pretty sure that it is. And it's a dangerous mindset to have, even if you are actually well defended. And that's true for a lot of things.
Great point. I think it's funny that paper you quoted about the spider mites increasing certain terpenes is definitely going to get passed around, because Miss Nudie Grows told me when she was working at some of these LPs in Canada, they were quoting similar papers about thrips and how thrips can potentially increase their cannabinoids or terpenes, things like that. She's like, yeah, but every single operation that I saw that worked at that had thrips and they like weren't working too hard to get rid of it, it was killing their yields. Their plants were not testing well. And just generally, she's had much more success with having IPM implemented in healthy gardens. So cheers to Miss Nudie Grows, former panelist and always badass Canadian up there, just crushing it in the commercial cannabis space. So it's interesting to know that I think almost like Dr. MJ cautions people whenever I bring up the drought stress study, rightfully. I think it's important to caution people of the spider mites increasing terpenes, because then you're going to have some people that are going to like push and just be like, oh, you know what, fuck it, I got spider mites, I'm going to let them go, it'll increase my terps. I heard about some studies.
Please don't breed spider mites. Please don't breed spider mites, people. We don't want spider mites.
It's not.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Holy cow. Hold on a second. That's really a thing? Holy cow.
It is if you work at an insectary. But yeah, definitely prime get the milk for free. Don't buy the cow, right? Don't get the spider mites in your plant. Prime it with various compounds, or there are substances out there on the market that people like to use, like chitin and chitosan and that sort of a thing.
Matthew, what do you think? I have a theory, and I told the guys at work, and I said, when we're hanging these sachets on our plants, they're releasing these predator mites, that I think that they can stimulate the plants just like another pest. How would the plant be able to tell the difference other than when it starts getting fed on, I suppose?
No, that's a great point. It exactly gets into what I was going to say. I love that you asked that question. So basically, they can't tell the difference. That's why beneficial organisms. I could go into a long sort of dialogue about what that means, or monologue rather, but I won't. But basically, like beneficial fungi, beneficial bacteria, and even beneficial predatory mites, they're walking around. They're doing various things, and some like parts of their body, just like yourself, there's detritus that falls off of you, skin and hair and other sorts of things like that we don't think about, and oils on our skin and stuff. But those are basically indicators. And so a plant, when it gets exposed to these fungi or other organisms, the plant cells will go, oh, that's chitin. And so that creates a response, a signal response that will boost the immune system or immune signaling through certain pathways. And it's a lot of gobbledygook. It's very complicated.
In a living soil situation or organic situation, you might attract, just having chitin around, you might attract some kind of microbe that's going to start breaking down chitin with some chitinase. And now you've got fucking basically acid for fucking insects. I think that's awesome.
Well, yeah, you'll be able to, like when they die eventually, right? They serve their purpose, they reproduce, they die in your soil, and then organisms that are able to do that, like you just said, will break those body parts down. And like you say, they gotta use a chitinolytic compound or enzyme or whatever to break that down. And then, like you say, your what's the word I'm looking for? you're you're allowing them to continue in your soil and in your environment, which is honestly what you want.
Yeah. It's like a food source for something that eats chitin, and that's a good thing because you want something that eats chitin around. Even some fungi, right? Even some fungi go after chitin.
Absolutely. And I was sort of illustrating the point that like the idea of like a pest or a non-pest is sort of very contextual, where like they were showing like we talked about it a few weeks ago, the Rhizophagus irregularis, so that mycorrhiza, it was able to mine was it nitrogen or phosphorus, I forget, from a chitin. It was able to do that, but it was only able to really do that when there are other two microbes, a bacteria and a protozoa, if I remember right. And through their combined efforts, they were able to like up the content like to 70 or 65% more for the plant. And that was like pretty amazing. So it's all about the right combination.
Yeah, and I think that's wild. It's like when I hear things like that, it's like that's why we'll never fully understand what the fuck is going on, because it blows my mind. Just something like that. How could you happenstance to figure that out? Let alone replicate that a billion different times.
Right. You try and do that in vitro, you wouldn't even put those organisms together properly. Probably they must have found it in nature, right, Matthew?
Well, this was an experiment. I don't think that they found this process in nature first, but I don't really remember, because they could have actually observed something like that and then did their own experiment with different organisms. But I think that the theory is helpful to know. But I think that the idea that you would be able to like open up your tricorder and like scan your soil sphere or whatever and be like, oh, the tricorder says that I have, this this amount of colony of bacteria and this amount of fungi, I think is maybe a little far-fetched. But if you
fungi blew me away the other day. I was hiking and I've seen these rocks and I thought there was like chalk on them or something, or like bird shit or something. It was like a bright white substance growing on these rocks, and I looked closer and it was actually a fungi just growing on rock, like dense, just like kind of, there's grass and things around it, but it's on like a trail where it's mostly like stones, and it wasn't right next to like a bush.
It wasn't lichen, was it?
Perhaps, I don't know, but there was ants feeding on it. When I looked up at it, there was like ants eating the fungi and like moving it and working with it, or maybe they're being parasitized by it, who knows. So the one thing that I could be the number 6 to add on to the question earlier. And we talked about it at the beginning of the show quite a bit. One thing you can do to increase your yield and reduce your stress, both on the plant and personally, is pick out some genetics, do some research and find some genetics that are going to be easy to grow. You could say for your environment, but you, like everybody else said, you kind of want to dial your environment in so it's relatively in that happy place where cannabis is going to grow. And then when you get to that space, you have the options depending on where you live. I live in California. You can go and buy whatever clone from the dispensary. You might think, oh, well, this one's popular and hot, and I heard about it on that show, like Jealousy or Cookies or whatever. A lot of those don't love like light, even at the levels Dr. MJ recommended, which are great levels, 700, 800 ppfd. But if you gave it to them, some of them will get stunted and yield terribly, and you have to really dial it in. Where like other things, you can just kind of like overfeed it, give it a ton of light, and it's going to yield well. It's going to smoke well and get you a lot of product to get you started at least. So I would do research and try and find genetics that a lot of people have had success with. Like, I'm not going to name any individual one, but look around at what the people are growing, what the people are continuing to grow, like, and having success with themselves, and ask them about what they like and dislike and other breeders that they may have tried, and try and find a good genetic source that will set you up on the path to be successful. Because if you're going in with something that's hard to grow, then you're going to give yourself a lot more challenges than you want. And there's a lot of like out there, but don't be like, I guess it's easy to be like machismo, or at least like when I started growing again, I saw like these labels. They're like, this is for a beginner grower and this is for like an expert grower. And don't be like, oh, well, I'm an expert, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not going to be dissuaded by this label. Like, sometimes they're actually going to be harder to grow. And if you don't have your shit dialed in yet, then don't get the expert or difficult or whatever. If they give you that option or labeling, listen to them and try and find the one that says, this is good for beginners, this yields well, this is resistant to molds or mildews or whatever, and try and find other people to corroborate that said, hey, I grew it and got good yields and good terpenes and didn't have molds and mildews in X, Y, or Z environment that's similar to yours. So that would be my
Honestly, I
tip.
trust that more than anything on a box, anything I read. If I have a buddy, somebody from the Michigan Bros Grow Show says, "Yo, I grew this and it was great," I trust that more than I trust any of the other bullshit.
Even the breeder. I mean, like we were talking
Even
about
the
last
breeder.
week, you can't trust like the person who's selling the thing. Obviously, they're financially motivated to tell you everything you want to hear to buy it. But when somebody else who put their hard work and money and time into something can say, "Hey, I grew this, and like I'm not being paid to say this. Like I just really like this one over these other ones," then it's probably a good place to start looking.
You know, in my experience, when I've seen the like expert seeds or whatever, that label applied to it, like this is harder to grow, it's usually, I think, to cover up for not being very stable genetics or being prone to herm or being other potential problems in it. And labeling it that way sort of is a clever way to cover up the problems, preemptively blame the grower should anything go wrong, and potentially even sort of add an appeal to the product itself, because growers are like, I want the expert strain. So I definitely don't think that means it's better. I think that means the breeder still has work to do to make that strain more stable or to make that strain sort of more vigorous or whatever else. I mean, the expert, maybe it's just a little runty because it's just kind of, not the best genetics. So I would
opposite,
definitely
like
think about
unruly.
it that way.
Like if it grows too big, like the Blue Dream Femmes that I got from HSO, they said it's going to stretch a bunch, blah, blah, blah. And you can, take their word for it or whatever. And then you actually try and grow it and it 4X's its veg height or whatever. And then you're sitting there like, oh shit, like this thing is a lot to wrangle. But those are things I guess you can learn and clone and deal with it or plan for it.
Yeah, but that's what pops into my, just what Dr. Coco was talking about. Like when I see expert, to me, that means, oh, that's a pain in the ass to grow.
Yeah.
I move on.
Yeah. Look out.
Why would I
Red
do
flag.
I don't
Like a
need
red
any of
flag.
that bullshit in my tent. Like, no, expert, what are you talking about? That means that it's probably going to harm.
Don't you want to buy the cool, hard mode, extreme, exclusive, elite seeds?
I'll say this though, to give some legitimacy to it. Like a Corvette's not the easiest car to drive. Like some of these older naturally aspirated cars, like there's a little bit more. It's more difficult to drive, but you can get a lot of performance out of something like that as a comparison.
See, I really think
like
that's what they're trying to. That's the analogy they're going for, Chuck. And I think that's the analogy that a lot of growers sort of buy into. Like, oh, if it's harder to grow, that must be better. Like a sports car is harder to drive, that must be like better car to drive or whatever. I think that analogy is it may hold true in a few examples, but I think by and large, it's not. It's sort of connected like that. I think the expert strains are just like Spartan is saying, harder to grow, bigger pains in the butt. And it's a way that a breeder can bring to market a strain that's not yet ready and not be sort of like blamed for it themselves. Like when everybody has a bad experience, the breeder can just say, oh yeah, I said it was an expert strain. Like, I guess you're not an expert grower, sorry, but like.
Oh yes. Oh,
well, I was going to finish my comparison by saying, like a sports car, they're both flashy and problematic, right? Like the cookie strain, it's flashy and it's got a lot of appeal. Like a Ferrari, they're flashy and they have a lot of appeal, but they also have lots of problems, and like they tend to hurt me a lot. And I will say I love Forum Cut Girl Scout cookie. It's great medicine for me, but I found other crosses of it, and I found other strains that also have high amounts of humulene and beta caryophyllene, which were the terpenes in there that I found to be medically therapeutic for like my arthritis. And I found other, like cherry pie as another cookie lineage strain that was terrible yielding, has tons of Hermes, but it helped me sleep. And for a while, that was like a go-to for me. And the cut that we had didn't herm, but a lot of people have cherry pies that herm. And ultimately, I ended up losing that. But I wasn't devastated because I went on to find CBN. CBN is super sedative, and I can get it at scale from hemp growers for very low, cheaper than I could produce it myself. Or I can make high CBN RSO, which I do a little bit of both. And I don't need that strain necessarily anymore. So the education process is definitely important. But yeah, I think that there is a balance, because like I do believe like there's good breeders out there like Duke Diamond who says, I've worked this strain as much as I can, but it still has some Hermes, right? And he'll put it out there, he'll sell it for less, and he'll warn you about it. But then there's other breeders that are like, this is an expert strain. Like those are usually like European seed banks that have Purple Punch, cookies, and every single strain that you've ever heard of, and they're selling all of them. Right. Like if that person is telling you like expert versus beginner, I think that's a little bit different than like a guy who's got like a whole stable of his own genetics that he's personally made and worked and can tell you this one is actually rock solid. It's not going to hurt on you at all. Versus this one over here might, but this one has this different flavor or high or growth pattern that you might be looking for. So it might be worth maybe hunting through, like Tao said. Some people are like, fuck it, I'll just chop the herms and keep the good ones. And unfortunately, I think that keeps a lot higher intersex numbers within this polyhybrid F1 breeding that we're seeing a lot of, like that earlier question sort of kind of alluded to. I'll say it hasn't changed too much in the last like 20, 30 years. Like there's been just tons and tons and tons of polyhybrid. We've had more and more science every year, and there are groups. You've got like, I think most of it's actually being done in hemp because it can be legally, like Oregon CBD, where they're doing genetic testing, terpene testing, all of that stuff for different chemotypes, phenotypes, genotypes, everything. They're like scientifically labeling everything down to the, but then you've got like people that are just passionate breeders. So there's a whole wide variety of people doing good and not so good work. I want to say cheers to Kazoo while we got a little moment of silence. Spartan poking on his bong bowl over there. And I was just rambling, but yeah, there's usually
to give
delay.
I liked the car metaphor, and like I was just telling somebody today, I was looking over at somebody who was driving this hot to trot Corvette, and I was remarking to myself and them that I wouldn't want to be driving such a high performance sport vehicle currently for reasons, right? And so similarly, like, is it difficult to grow or to maintain because like it's hard to get the parts, or is it because it's a gas guzzler? Is it because of these reasons that are really actually not something to be worn as a badge of honor?
Right.
Or is it because it's like like it's a really, Jack, you'll get this because we talked about it. This is a sort of a weird example, but like jet fighters. So like some of them are made in such a way that they can maneuver in this really nice way called super maneuverability. But in a world where missile systems and things are tracking stuff at like 90 to 100 miles out, it's like, does that matter? Does that maneuverability really matter? There's a debate about that. And I think it's similar here. Like, what is the reason why it's high maintenance? And if it's for reasons that you could probably, like Doctor said, sort of ameliorate, then like maybe you should do that. Maybe there's a better incentive to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matthew. And I totally grant Jack's point.
My initial advice was
cars,
to not get the sporty one. My advice was to steer clear of those, just to be very clear.
I got that.
Pick the genetic that we are going to be.
But all
using.
really going in is that it's going to be hard to
backtracking,
drive.
Jack.
And sports cars are hard to drive, but so are like, a 1966 conversion van where the transmission is slipping. I mean, that's also hard to drive, right? So
that's not a pretty metaphor.
Right. You don't
Semi-truck
know.
is hard to drive if you don't know how to drive a semi-truck, which I don't.
Exactly.
Yes,
and you don't
special
necessarily,
license.
a school bus from like 1980 is hard to drive. There's a lot of other things that are probably hard to drive too that aren't desirable at all. So yeah, I agree. I see growers sort of, drifting towards those kinds of things, and it's not where they're likely to have the best experience or the best results.
Even when it's a legit thing, like, as everyone knows, I am the most expert grower amongst everyone on the planet.
You don't have to tell us every time, Tao.
Okay.
Only the planet? Come on, man. You're not claiming the universe.
Well, I haven't left the Earth yet.
Okay.
I guess that's very
metaphysically-
humble of you, though. That's a good point. There could be someone there.
Right. So in any case, it was very good to hear that more than just I had trouble cultivating that Bruce Banner, because that's an example of perhaps where it's actually legit, where it's worth your effort to learn how to drive that Corvette, because that's really good stuff. But on the other hand, no, it's not. I'm telling you, I'm giving up on it. I still have it. I have it here. I just took a cut of it. I'm going to make some more seeds with that female, and then I'm killing it off. I have made up my mind. That's it.
If Tao gives up on something, it's really fucked, because he kept that weird mutant plant for like 3 years that was like 6 inches tall, and it didn't even look like a cannabis plant.
Get this guy some more cultivation space. He deserves it.
It was good to know that other people had issues. But finicky plants are, they're very
I
It's
still,
very
yeah, I
big.
still want to stand up for them too, because I keep Mac
Yes.
one, and that's a famous one for being a finicky plant, and she is a finicky bitch.
Yes,
But
and I
I
was going to
haven't found.
say also,
Yeah,
people
but I
learn
just
how to drive that Corvette. They learn how to drive that Cadillac from the 19 whatever that like drives like a yacht.
no. Well, I think I'm more of a combination of I'm doing that now, but at the
Right.
same time, I have the attitude of Dr. Coco, and as I know there's going to be a cross of this before too long that actually is good, that I can replace it with, that I don't have to, bother with. But until I find that cross, I'm going to keep growing this one because I like it. So that's
And it's
kind of
exactly
where
that
I'm-
kind of
There you go.
pragmatism that people are trying to combat with
Yeah.
like marketing and stuff. I think trying to put the wool
You're-
over
Spartan will
your
Spartan
eyes.
kick regardless of marketing.
But you're at
Spartan,
a different stage of your sort of career as a grower too, Spartan, right? Like you're not a new grower. You're not doing this for your first harvest. You're not sort of like pinning all your hopes on a really successful first harvest. So
for
it-
sure.
That's a good point.
that context should be taken into consideration when you're making these kinds of decisions. To new growers, think of your career in growing as like a hobby you're going to stay with for the rest of your life. You're going to have plenty of time to grow all sorts of different strains when you have like cases full of cannabis from previous harvests sitting in this corner in your room or whatever, and you don't have to worry about the sort of the disaster of having herms or losing a harvest or getting a bunch of seeds or whatever else is not the end of the world at that point. So that's how you build up your stockpile before you start experimenting too hard.
That's a great point.
well, it's
I
not going
wish
to be
I
the,
had done that. I wish I had done that. I'm kind of the opposite of that. I beat myself up. I put one of my best harvest was my first harvest. I put everything into every harvest. I'm hard on myself when I make mistakes. But this isn't, this is important to me, and I get it. I get a lot of people do it as a hobby. It's a little more important to me, my family, but I try to do the best I can with every single plant, and I'm really harsh on myself when I make mistakes, and I'm trying to like just get better with every harvest, every plant. And I'll say, Cal, I threw in the towel on that Bruce banner immediately. That thing was way too hard. And the same thing with you, Jack. The Girl Scout cookie wasn't worth my time. I went on to Do-si-dos and Platinum. So I'm all on those ones. But every harvest means a lot to me. And I can get it where a grower does that. And you probably shouldn't put the pressure that I put on myself. But it's just something I've always done in all my life. And that's how I approach it.
Yeah, so right. If the harvest is really important to you to be successful, you're not going to monkey around with a bunch of things and make stupid decisions, right? You're going to.
And I don't. No, you're right. Correct.
Right,
100%.
exactly. And I'm not trying to say that these are all that the other things are stupid decisions, but like, in one of our challenge, we grew a 1 cola plant and we do like the party cup plants and stuff. I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're really geared towards production and all. This is having fun with it later on.
Right.
Supplies already secured, right?
What is that context? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's also important to remind
Like
new
hobby
growers,
growing.
it won't be their last grow. A lot of people
Right.
that do beat themselves up on their first grow, if it's not their best one, just kind of help get them through that first one and be like, hey, you've got another one coming up right after this, and another one after that, and another one after that. So don't be so worried. Like this one person, they have 5 plants that are looking pretty solid, and then they have like 1 run. And they're like, I just want to kill the run. Is it taking up space? I'm like, those other 5 plants aren't going to take up the space of that run. Well, just see how it finishes up. Like, it's not going to take you that much more time or effort. Just let it go. And they're like 2-3 weeks later, they're like, dude, I'm so glad I kept it because now I'm going to get something out of it. It's more than nothing. And that was my whole thought. I'm like, it's better than nothing. Just get it through this harvest. So you're early on in your game. You're going to have another grow. Don't worry about it. Just get as much as you can this run and do your best and learn from it. And we all have killer runs and we all occasionally have some mistakes. Like, even if it's not something you did, like guess who's Baculator, aka Capulator, speaking of the Mac, Miracle Alien Cookies or whatever, that breeder, he's called Guess Who's Baculator on Instagram because he used to be Capulator, he got banned, and then his old Bean Basement website, now he's back on Instagram. Well, his most recent post that I saw was his plants in the dark, and they'd been in the dark for like several days, and then his dehumidifier, he has like 3 generators, and like one of them didn't work, and then his AC compressor went down. So it's like not only are they in the dark, it like got to like 90 plus degrees or whatever, and like finally he shows like day 5 or 90 like plus degrees and high humidity, and it finally gets everything back going again. And although it's not perfect, things are still alive and they're still going. He got back on his feet, and a lot of the comments in those first posts before he even got his shit back up were like, hey man, welcome to growing. A lot of people think that they're just gonna like they get success in their home grow and they want to scale it up and everything's just going to be successful. It's like growing is literally just how you deal with problems for most people, because it's not when, it's if. Like, it's not if, it's when. It's
a constant barrage of shit to deal with, and you better be ready and be on top of it. That's what it comes down to in my eyes.
And a lot of people look at everybody else's grows through the lens of social media, which we all know we post our best selves there, right? We post our prettiest plants and our best looking flowers. And when everything's going successful, we'll post more frequently and stuff like that. Like, that's sort of basic human nature. When things go sideways or whatever, you post a lot less, or you don't post at all. So when you're looking around at everybody else's grow, you see like everybody else is killing it, man. And everybody else never has these problems that I'm having. And I'm over here struggling like a dumbass. And I really appreciate when people do have problems and they share it and they talk about it and they go through it. And, that's a huge experience, not just for them to learn, but just be aware, everybody has issues in their gardens, regardless of what you're seeing them sort of reporting about their plants. You're not alone in that. We all learn, we all struggle, we all have issues, and we all try to recover from them.
And that makes you better, not worse. I mean, learning from those things, you become literally a more knowledgeable grower who's better able to deal with experiences like that in your own grow, in a larger scale setting in the future, consulting with your friends or family who also need help, that are going to run into problems. So it's not something to like have as a badge of shame. It's like more of a badge of honor. It's like, oh, I've gone through flooding my grow room now. Now I know what a float valve does.
Right. You learn something when you flood your grow room. You learn something. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be, but there's lessons there.
Jake, you mean you learn how to set up a double float valve?
Yeah, there you go. Like different people come away with different takeaways from that situation, but you learn stuff. Absolutely. Every time you have a plant that doesn't do what you think it's going to do, you learn something. When the plant does exactly what you think it's going to do, you don't learn anything. It fulfills your expectations of what the plant was. You already expected that, you already knew that. So take those times to figure out the anomalies, figure out when things go sideways, and you'll become a better grower.
It's like in sports, sometimes you learn more in the losses than you do just beating a team by like 20 points. It's like, oh man, we lost. What the fuck could we have done better this time? And like, how did they get the best of us? But no other grower has got his hand up again. I want to let you jump back in there.
Real quick, I just wanted to say that's another way that I differ from a lot of other growers. I could give two shits about the yield. I don't care about that at all. I would rather have 4 ounces of really fire weed than 1.5 pounds of okay weed. I am always about the fucking chronic. And if you want to be really competitive and you want to be able to be good at this, you better learn how to grow the chronic. The freaking yield will come, but you better learn how to grow good weed. And if you can't, you're in big trouble. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You want to start with the quality first and then scale up, not the other way around, or at least I feel like one is more finicky than the other typically.
No, actually, my buddy's been growing for 25 years. The first thing he taught me when got me how to grow was to don't worry about the quantity. You always worry about the quality, and you will be successful. And I took that to heart, and I never forget that. And I apply that to my life every single day when I'm trying to get better at growing. That's why I went down the organic. That's why I switched some of that stuff up. It's not because I want a bigger yield. I'll figure that out eventually. I'll branch out, but I'm always worried about the quality, because that's really where you're gonna. There's nothing better than when somebody's like, damn, when you show up and you got the fire in your pocket, man. That is the best feel in the world. And I encourage all growers to search for that.
Mm-hmm. You could always grow more. You could add a whole nother room if you really were
Hell yeah.
grow more, but you can't grow more quality. The quality is what the genetics are, or pretty
You're
much.
capped.
And
it's like a ceiling.
Yeah.
You have a potential ceiling of that genetic and what it can
But
possibly
you know what
produce.
I was going to say earlier to the new grower? If they have a strain that they really love, they should maybe try and find seeds of that, whether it's easy or a little more finicky, because then they'll be like all into it a little more, maybe.
That's a good point. You have
do it.
Build that
grow what
connection.
you like. Yeah, grow what you like too if it's easy. Yeah.
Especially if you don't naturally have a strong connection with plants or like a green thumb, and you're not like already super captivated by gardening. Once you get your first crop and get like stoned for the first time off your own homegrown, I think that's like enough of a motivator for most people. But during that first grow, if it's like some unknown strain for you, it might be more difficult to stay focused and put as much love and dedication and effort that you need to have a good quality harvest. So
I
agree
don't
with
know.
that.
I think if you can't stay focused on your first grow, you're probably not going to stay as a grower for a long time. I mean, most of the growers that like they're their babies then, and you're paying like attention to every new leaf and everything like that.
Yes, you're right.
I think
Yep.
most growers
Yep.
are like
I
that.
agree.
If you're disinterested by the first grow, then I don't see a long future for you here.
Yeah, it's going to be a short growing career.
Yeah.
The one thing I was going to say with related kind of back to my initial comment on genetics was you do want something easy, but you don't necessarily want the thing that's targeted as like, this is the biggest yielder in my, like, if you want to go more like Noah, where you're looking for something that's also really good quality, like Big Bud is a strain from the past. It is probably one of the biggest yielders, but now that there's better quality around, most people don't grow Big Bud anymore because it's just not the flavor or the effect a lot of people are looking for. Some people still might like it, but I think that it's important to also focus on the quality because it's fun having those experiences of handing somebody a jar. And then, like, I remember Brandon Ross handed Frenchie Cannoli a jar and he smelled it and he's like, ooh la la. It's just like, he couldn't even help himself. It was like just a natural reaction. And Brandon caught it on video somewhere on one of his Instagrams. You might be able to scroll back and find it. But I had the same feeling with Tommy Chong. When my wife won the giveaway to go meet him up at this cannabis cafe, Lowell Cafe, which no longer even exists. I was sitting over there on the side because I didn't win the giveaway and I was just like smoking my own homegrown. I paid the little unbottling fee to bring your own cannabis in, which is like $35. And I was like, fuck that. I'm not smoking your shitty weed here and paying high bucks for it when I could just bring in my own stuff and smoke it. Well, sure enough, I was passing joints over to my wife and she was handing them to Tommy and he's like, this is good. And she's like, oh, my husband grew it. He's sitting right over there. That got me invited to the table because when I handed them the jar, Tommy smelled the jar and he's like, holy shit, this smells really fucking good. So shout out to Subcool who bred the Chernobyl and the strawberry daiquiri, which impressed Tommy Chong enough to get me invited to the table and smoke with them for a few hours. So it definitely is important to have the chronic, as Noah described it. If you have some really good shit, it's going to impress people and it might get you places that you never would have thought you'd be.
Do you know the story of Chernobyl, the strain? Because I don't.
I do. Subcool named things basically based off of the most, what would get the most attention, I think. He was a kind of highfalutin individual. It's a cross of Jack the Ripper and something else. Somebody would have to give me the lineage in the chat, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But yeah, Subcool bred it. I think it was because also in part, he liked the idea that cannabis and hemp in general could, like I think I might even talk about this last week on the show, can be used to remediate nuclear radiation. So like if they were to go to Chernobyl and grow a bunch of hemp, they'd be able to suck some of that radiation out of the ground and then dispose of that hemp, and it'd be theoretically a safer place. So
They've done that.
So yeah, it's an active process. So I think that was probably part of Subcool's inspiration behind naming it that. But it was also like it was an explosion. Like his shit's the bomb. Like Chernobyl blew up. It's a nuclear reactor. It's a big fucking explosion.
There's two like named phenos, the Slimer.
Slimer.
And
I
then,
like that name, Slimer.
What was
Golden
the other
Ticket.
one? Golden Ticket. It's the one I
Golden
always
Ticket and
forget.
Slimer are the same thing, I believe. Golden Ticket was a pheno that was given to, I think, Coma the grower, who then called it Slimer later on. But I believe it's the same cut. I could be mistaken, but I'm 90% sure.
Like lemon, like limey sherbet, like terps.
Yep, like a lime Slurpee almost. Like the pheno that I popped from seed, I actually, that was grown next to the Jack Spike Punch, but it smelled just like lime Slurpee, like a margarita almost, and very, very good aroma, good flavor, and super potent high.
Pheno
I have a
grew outside
question.
was the leafiest plant I ever grew in my life, and that's why I didn't grow it again. But we got packs at work. We'll probably go through it one of these days.
I got a question. What do they do with that hemp that absorbed the radiation?
I think they bury it somewhere. or take
Harvested it. I
outside.
don't know what they did with it.
Yeah, it's now
Most
it's carrying
radioactive-
the radiation, right?
Well, so yeah, most radioactive waste, when it's disposed, it goes down to the ground somewhere very far away, hopefully with a bunch of other, sort of
All
absorbents.
the hazardous stuff goes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to weigh in on the parent of the male was Jack the Ripper, and Blood Wreck was the female for Chernobyl. Blood Wreck is Trainwreck across to Trinity. So Trainwreck and Trinity are both Northern California strains. Kind of high terpenoline, kind of like a sharp, bright smell to them. Some pinene in there as well. But
I
also
remember it being
limey
like a
notes.
lime green, right? But the bud itself.
Super bright.
Really,
Yeah. Yeah, like lime, like Dr. MJ's kind of logo on the screen, like that color or even lighter.
All right, I'm gonna have to jump out of here, guys. We got Big Ed Rosenthal coming on again on the Michigan Bros Grow Show. I want to make sure I get on and get a spot. So I want to jump off of here. Thanks for having me today. Thanks. Shout out to chat. You guys had some great questions today. I love that 5 things question. That was a great one. And
It was nice
it
that we
went
could
by
all just
so
do one.
fast.
We could all
went
just
by
do
so
one.
fast. Yeah, I know. We all just do one. Yep. Anyways, fuck the MCMA. I'm out, guys. See ya.
Grow
Peace and
love,
love.
Spartan.
Fuck the
Peace
MSMA.
out,
Cheers,
Spartan.
Spartan. I'm gonna spotlight you, Noah. So don't think that we didn't see you over there. You're over in your grow room. You're showing off some dank. Speaking of dialed in environment and some dank buds and organic, here we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull out some of the buds of the rack. I pulled this one right here. I did a little experiment on this gelato plant. I cut a lot of the tops off right here, just so I could get some light to the bottoms because it wasn't finishing as good. But man, I've been really just focusing, trying my best here, and that's it. This is a great conversation today, and I just hope all the new growers out there, I hope that they don't get discouraged, and I hope they're interested. Like Dr. Coco said, if you're not interested in your first harvest, man, that's not a good sign. I got grow equipment in my room right now from people that freaking sold to me for dirt cheap because they didn't want to do it no more. It's worth the hard work, man, and especially if you're into this, you like it, you're gonna have a lot of fun doing it, and there's nothing better. That story about French cannoli and Brandon Rust, that's it, man. I dream of that kind of stuff, man. That's what I'm doing this for. I want to have, like I said, I'm not joking. I'd rather have just a little bit of chronic than just some okay weed, man. Because I love the chronic. I love.
You got a lot of bit of chronic over there, Noah. You're fucking crushing it, buddy.
Man, I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good, man. This right here, look at this big overflow top right there.
You're not even a year into organics, and you're already filling up the
That's a
straw pretty
nice
well.
chunk you just lifted up. Nice one.
Yeah, there's some big ones here. There's some big ones. And I posted a couple of the gelato tops that I took off of this. And I'm going to do some of this sherbet back over here. I got some apple fritter over there. This overflow, man, this overflow OG right here is really, really good. 2 Gorilla Glue 4s that kind of stretched a little bit. Gorilla Glue 4 will do that. I might top those, take the little things out and try and pull them down. Yeah. And I had a great time today on the show today, man, with everybody for sure. So.
We always have an awesome time checking out your garden. I'm actually going to share screen because I think your Instagram is criminally underfollowed. More people should definitely check out Noah. We've got 1351, but check out some of these frosty ass buds, man. I mean, Noah is crushing it over there. This is a close up on some of the garden that we just saw. Day 56 at gelato. I mean, super frosty. Got some nice purples coming in there. Resin rails, as I like to describe them. This is absolutely beautiful bud and just consistent, amazing work. I know we were talking about how people only post their best stuff on social media, but you just saw Noah pan through his garden. It's a bunch of good looking stuff. Like, look at this frosty ass bud with another giant ass cola behind it. And just, you could scroll down his whole entire page. Noah's been doing this for years. Just big, beautiful buds and hard work. Like you said, it's not like it comes easy. He puts in the work to get this. It wasn't like he just woke up one day and there's dank growing out there. He puts in the time and the effort. And as all of us do, anybody who has had success in their garden, I commend all of you because I know it's not easy. I know that there's some late nights, early mornings, sore necks and backs and hands, and it's definitely a lot of work, but it's nice to be able to spotlight someone like Noah and many of the other people that we've been able to have come on the show, just show off some of the dank, because I think as a community, we're all getting better together. I'm seeing more people growing pictures like this than the opposite. You know, it's more and more people are growing dank now than having unsuccessful growth. So I'm happy to see people continuing to have that success. And I think these types of shows are part of the reason that we're all able to get better together. You know, people sharing what they know and all that hard work we put in over the years and sharing tips and tricks and seeing what works across the board for everybody else.
I wish I had access to a show like this when I first got started. People like Brandon, Dr. Coco, Steve Angel, the whole entire parent of Brand Roast, all these guys, man, they're all high-end growers and respect everybody's opinion. And I ask questions on the show, and I've applied it to my room, and anybody else that's listening can do that too.
100%.
I really appreciate that support.
Yeah, no, I think that oftentimes I'm asking questions just genuinely because I'm curious about it. Occasionally I'll be like devil's advocate or trying to come from like the common man's perspective and just give a little bit more context on a situation. but I've learned a great deal from the show, and still do every single week. I mean, we're coming up on 3 years, and I haven't felt yet like, oh, I'm going to go into this 2 hours and take nothing away from it. I always feel like, oh, there's something more to think about. The whole next week going into my garden, I have kind of these thoughts and ideas buzzing around my head, and also the Michigan Bros Grow Show and checking out them and other shows. It just gives you so many things to think about, and maybe experiment or maybe not. Just kind of take it as this is what other people are doing, and there's lots of ways to, go about getting a good harvest. Not everyone's going to do it the same way. So it's cool to see the different styles that also might be successful.
Yeah, I've definitely learned a lot too myself, especially from the chat and the various people that I've been able to interact with, and also like in other social media settings, just kind of collaborate with. It's like I say all the time, it's sort of surreal, and I'm also glad that I'm very humbled, honestly, that I'm able to have the influence that I have on this sort of a subject that I think is really important. And I look forward to seeing more people like myself kind of entering and sort of collaborating, and also people who are way more professional and I guess I would say like researchers and PIs and things. I'm excited to see all of that sort of scientific understanding kind of unfold more and more.
I'm curious because I've talked about this in the past, but where I discovered your content was seeing you tagged in grow photos of people with pests, and they'd be like, at Sink Angel, what is this? Like, at that point, had you already had a pretty deep understanding of like what all these pests were, or was part of that process identifying literally hundreds, probably thousands at this point of posts part of like your learning process? Like, you look at something and be like, what is that? And then do some more research on probably some of those occasions.
Steel sharpens steel, and it's definitely one of those situations where, because to me, I had this personal ethos of trying to help as many people as possible, given like the realistic situation that I'm in and everything. And it has definitely led to me either discovering a new pest or several new pests documented, at least on cannabis. And also sometimes there are organisms I hadn't experienced before ever. Sometimes there was something I already knew, or like kind of knew what group they might be a part of. But other times it was like totally new for me, which is rare, I have to say. But like, for example, giant scale or giant mealybug from I think it was South Africa was on somebody's cannabis like 2 years ago or more. And that was a really cool example that stayed with me. Africa has a lot of cool insects, but I find that has been really helpful for me, and also for interacting with, and honestly, it's almost like street cred to be perfectly honest. And I think that I credit a lot of that success I've had with just being in the trenches and helping people out. Which gives me pride. No, I appreciate that. Yeah,
I literally learned so much from IPM from just watching you tag different pests, because I'm like, what the hell is that? And then I'd go in the comments and you'd be like, this is a scientific name, and then like common name, and then it'd be like, oh, it's just a ladybug, but it was like ladybug larva or something that people haven't seen. It looks like a little alligator. It's kind of scary. It's like, what the hell is in my grow? But then you're like, oh, that's just a lady beetle, But there's lots of times where it was actually something problematic, or it was not problematic, and you let them know, hey, this isn't something you have to worry about. So it definitely gave me a fresh perspective on IPM of, this doesn't have to be something where I'm just like, tragic moment, I need to save my garden. But it's like, you could inform yourself and be educated about things that make them less scary, and even like save you some work in some cases. Like, some people would nuke their garden because they had a beneficial insect, just thinking, oh, any insect is bad, so I'm going to kill everything off, and then cause a bunch more damage than is needed. So very important perspective that you give, and I appreciate it. But that said, we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left. There's about 5 of us. If anybody has any final thoughts before we go into our shout outs, I'd love to hear them. But yeah, I guess I'll pass it off to anybody who might have anything that you didn't get to say earlier before we close it out.
Not I.
I'm just going to shout out the original host of the show for bringing me here. I'm a total nerd for all this, and to be hooked up with Tao and all you guys, every single Kyle, every grower that's been on this panel, I've learned a lot, and just a big shout out to Shane. I just want to say thanks a lot, and I feel lucky to be here and a part of the group.
We're lucky to have you, bud. We definitely appreciate you showing up whenever you have the time, and it's pretty much every single week. So we've been very fortunate to have you over these years, which it's crazy to say because when I first did this, I thought, oh, I'm going to do one show, to come on, do an interview or whatever. And like, this isn't going to be something I do regularly, but ultimately kind of got the bug where this is kind of the outlet for a lot of us who love cannabis and in our regular lives don't have as many people to talk about it as we'd love to. So we get this little outlet each weekend, and I appreciate it and everybody who comes. So Noah, why don't you let the people know where they can find you, and we'll do a little around the horn where people can find each other.
Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower with 2 E's on Instagram. You can find me there. You can always, I'm a regular here. And yeah, if you got any questions about what I got going on, you can shoot me a direct message or tag me in anything. I try and always help out, and I'm always down to learn myself. So yeah, till next week, I'll see you guys all then.
Cheers, Noah. And also cheers to Chef OMJ, who says, missing you guys. Wish I could be home in time to come on. Sorry about that, Chef. We definitely miss you as well. I never really remembered what the reason was that you weren't able to join the panel anymore, but you're always welcome to come back if your schedule ever changes, or if our time ever changes. Probably not likely, to be honest, but as far as our time changing. But if you're ever more available in this time, we'd love to have you back, Chef. But with that said, I want to pass it next to Dr. MJ.
Yeah, I miss having Chef on the panel. That was fun. Great show today. This was a lot of fun, covering all sorts of different topics. I think we all got into something interesting. I wanted to let everybody know the next Grower Love giveaway is now live on our deals and discounts page. And this is a really big prize that we've got up this time. Contest is going to run through March 15th, I think, or March 20th. I'll have to see. Jordan set it up. But we have a chilled Growcraft Ultra X3 330 watt light. I tested the prototype about a year ago, and now I'm giving one away. So you can just register for that on our deals and discounts page at Cocoa for Cannabis. Fun show today. We all learn stuff, guys. That's why I think we all come back to the show. I've learned a lot about how I grow, but I tell you, I have learned just like buckets full about how other people grow, and seeing that diversity and thinking about things that never come up in my grow. And it's just fascinating to always see what everybody else experiences as they're growing this plant. And I just wanted to reiterate the fact that we all make mistakes and we all learn from them too. So new growers should feel more at ease with the experience. And I think certainly in our growing community, you get all the credit in the world just for putting in the effort. It's much more in a sort of effort-based game than it is about results, at least, I mean, from the way you'll be received in the community and supported and stuff like that. So that's what I like about all you guys. That's what I like about sort of the chat in this show. Invite everybody over to Cocoa for Cannabis and join our community there. And I am Dr. MJ Coco, giving everybody grower love.
Always good to have you, Doc, and appreciate those grower love giveaways and just all the support of the community in so many different ways. Just always happy to have you here and learning along with us. And Chef says, how is Shane doing? He's doing well. I think it was for his best, for his health and for work and everything, that he took a step away from the show. And if he ever wants to come back, he's always welcome to. But I think that at this time, this is just not where his heart and passion is at as much as other things. So I'm happy for him that he's still healthy and well as far as the last time I talked to him. And he's just happy letting us kind of keep the show running. So I'm happy to continue the show and be part of this great community. So with that said, pass it next to Matthew.
So I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, that interacting with everyone like I have been, having this sort of direct person-to-person, multi-person connection. Like I said, steel sharpens steel, and it's definitely allowed me to hone myself, which I am incredibly grateful for. So if you're interested in getting that information, if you haven't encountered my educational content before, a lot of it is actually videos, a lot of short videos on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, is submitted from people who I've associated with on social media who are like, please share this. I want people to know what this looks like. Or you helped me find this out, please share it, for educational purposes. So you can find a lot of that media on my YouTube channel, also on my Instagram at SyncAngel, and also on Twitter at SyncAngel as well.
Thank you so much again for joining us. And last and certainly not least, the American one.
Jack, as always, thanks for taking the reins as the host. And it's always good to see the panel and everyone in chat. I want to reiterate again what Noah the Grower said about Shane. Thanks for bringing us all together and letting us do this and, giving us the push start. And I also want to reiterate what Dr. MJ Coco said, that it's awesome getting all the points of view from everyone. It's always a different angle. And it's like, you see others see things that you don't. Like I remember the one time the kid was saying his plants were hitting the top of his greenhouse. Everybody's like, yeah, you could super crop it, you could lean it over a little, tie it down. And I think it was you, Jack. You're like, yeah, why don't you just lift up the greenhouse, cut the legs or whatever, just lift it up so that you have more ceiling room. That seemed like the best move. So yeah, it's awesome to be here every week and learn and get different perspectives. And yeah, I'm the American one. And I can't wait till next week. Peace out, everybody.
Great to have you. Great to get some credit for advice that I don't know if I gave or not because it's been a few weeks, but always happy to have the American one. And I agree, the multiple perspectives that this show offers, both from the chat and the people on the panel, I really enjoy and love that. Different feedback and things that we would never see in our own garden that we get to kind of work through mentally together as a group to help maybe just an individual. Like it could be just one person's question that we go on a half an hour diatribe and really dive deep to how to best optimize that person's thing. But tonight we had a pretty general one. There's a lot of new growers out there, plenty still joining as states legalize or as people just gain the confidence or the time, money, and space to make it available to themselves. So welcome to all those people that are new growers, and thank you to all the regulars. I see tons of regulars. I know most of you have been growing for a long time, so I think that we do a good job trying to mix up the topics for new stuff and more in the weeds, deeper, high sciences and things like that. I always have a lot of fun with it, kind of whatever path we go down. And yeah, with no further ado, I'm at Jack Greenstock. I'm going to cover up my camera so you can see my logo on Instagram. I'm at Jack Greenstock. Jack
Actually,
_ Greenstock.
You've kept a Cowboy Blazer fan on highlight, I think.
Oh, okay. On the YouTube, at least, I just see him like his outer ring, but
oh, I see.
Remove spotlight. There we go. But at least we're in the gallery view. So it can't be perfect, just like in growing, right? We all make mistakes.
Exactly.
But that's what it's all about. And mistake is just an opportunity to get better. As soon as you admit it, accept it, and then move forward. So something to think about. And stay positive, everybody. Peace and love. We'll catch you all next week. Look forward to doing this. And there's no signs of us stopping anytime soon. So this is Jack Greenstock signing out. Peace and love.
Grower love, everyone.
Later, everyone.